The mist in Edinburgh always feels alive, wrapping itself around the dark volcanic stone of the old town like a secret someone is trying desperately to keep. It was a cold Tuesday evening when the trap finally closed. I was standing under the dripping stone archway of the old cathedral precinct, a paper cup of black tea warming my hands, watching the heavy fog roll up from the Firth of Forth. Through the gray gloom, I saw them. Clara was laughing, that bright, effortless sound that used to make me believe everything was going to be fine. Behind her walked Julian and Marcus, their shoulders hunched against the damp wind, their eyes darting around the courtyard with a mixture of nervous anticipation and unearned confidence. I didn't wave. I didn't call out. I just watched them approach, feeling the cold air settle deep into my lungs. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet had already been cleared away. 3 months earlier, my life had been dismantled. I was a senior structural surveyor tasked with restoring the city's historic underground vaults. It was a project I had poured 2 years of my life into, securing the funding, mapping the delicate masonry, and treating the ancient stone with the reverence it deserved. Then, overnight, the contract was abruptly terminated. I was accused of professional negligence, of falsifying safety reports that could have put the public at risk. The evidence was damning, meticulously forged, and planted deep within my digital files. It didn't take me long to find the source. Clara, my partner in both life and work, had partnered with Julian and Marcus, 2 ambitious developers who wanted to bypass the expensive conservation laws to build a subterranean luxury shopping complex. They needed me out of the picture to fast-track their dangerous, cheap design. They thought they had buried me under a mountain of bureaucracy and shame, but they made a fundamental mistake. They assumed that because I was quiet, I was defeated. My grandfather, a master stonemason who spent his life restoring the cathedrals of Europe, always told me that the most powerful gear in any clock is the one that turns in absolute silence. He taught me to look at the joints, the unseen support beams, the hidden stresses where pressure builds up over decades. Betrayal is a lot like a structural flaw in a building. If you try to patch it over with lies, you only make the eventual collapse more spectacular. I didn't confront them. I didn't send angry emails or make desperate phone calls. Instead, I went back to the archives. I used my remaining security clearance and my deep knowledge of the city's underground layouts to document every single shortcut, every forged signature, and every compromised pillar they were planning to use for their new development. On that rainy Tuesday, they believed they were meeting a representative from the city's Heritage Commission to sign the final paperwork that would hand over the vaults to their development firm. They had no idea that I had personally arranged the meeting, or that the representative they were about to meet was someone who knew the true value of integrity. I stepped out from the shadow of the archway, my footsteps echoing softly on the wet cobblestones. Clara stopped instantly, her laughter dying in her throat as she saw me. Julian narrowed his eyes, shifting his weight defensively, while Marcus tried to muster a polite, patronizing smile. "Good evening," I said, my voice quiet, completely matching the steady rhythm of the rain. "You're right on time. The stone down here doesn't like to be kept waiting." Clara cleared her throat, her eyes scanning the dark courtyard. "What are you doing here? This is a private site inspection. You don't have authorization." "Actually, I do," I replied, gesturing toward the heavy iron gate that led down into the historic vaults. "And so do you, for the next hour at least. I think you'll find the inspection highly illuminating." Before they could argue, the heavy wooden door behind me opened, and a tall, imposing figure stepped into the dim light. Alistair Vance was a legend in the world of historic preservation, a senior structural safety commissioner whose word could halt a multi-million-pound project with a single stroke of his pen. Years ago, when Alistair was a young inspector, he had missed a critical shifting of the foundation in a major public library. I had found the error during a routine check, quietly corrected it without filing a public report, and saved his career from ruin. Alistair was a man of immense honor. He never forgot a kindness, and he spent the last month quietly reviewing the comprehensive dossier of structural fraud I had compiled on Clara, Julian, and Marcus. Alistair nodded to me, his face a mask of stern professionalism. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his deep Scottish accent cutting through the damp air. "Let us head below. We have much to discuss regarding the integrity of your proposed foundations. We walked down the spiral stone staircase, the temperature dropping with every step. The air down in the vault smelled of earth, ancient lime mortar, and damp stone. Clara and her partners walked closely together, their hushed whispers bouncing off the curved ceilings. They still believed this was a routine hurdle, a simple formality before they could begin excavation. They had no idea that the entire inspection had been designed to expose their greed in the very spaces they sought to destroy. Alistair stopped in the center of the largest chamber beneath a massive stone arch that supported the street above. He opened a thick leather folder, pulling out the blueprints they had submitted, alongside the original structural surveys I had recovered from the city archives. He began to speak, his voice calm, methodical, and devastating. He didn't raise his voice, but every word fell like a hammer blow. He pointed out the exact locations where they had planned to cut corners. The pillars they had falsely claimed were reinforced, and the geological reports they had deliberately ignored. With every point Alistair made, the color drained from Julian's face. Marcus began to sweat, his eyes darting toward the exit, while Clara stood frozen, realizing that her entire carefully constructed web of deceit had been mapped out with surgical precision. "This isn't just a matter of substandard engineering," Alistair said, looking directly at Clara. "This is a deliberate attempt to compromise public safety for financial gain. The documentation provided here, including the forged signatures of former surveyors, constitutes criminal fraud. The Heritage Commission is revoking your permits immediately, and a formal investigation has been launched with the city authorities." Clara looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of anger and desperation. "You did this," she whispered. "You ruined us." I looked back at her, feeling a profound sense of stillness. I didn't feel anger, nor did I feel a cheap thrill of malice. I simply felt the relief of a heavy load being lifted. "No," I said softly. "You built a structure on a foundation of lies. I just pointed out where the cracks were." I turned and walked back up the stone stairs, leaving them in the cold dampness of the vault with Alistair and the weight of their own choices. When I emerged into the Edinburgh night, the rain had stopped and the mist was beginning to clear, revealing a sky filled with cold, distant stars. I took a deep breath of the fresh, clean air, feeling the lingering tension of the past 3 months evaporate into the night. Months have passed since that evening. The development project was permanently canceled, and the vaults have been placed back under the care of the Historic Trust. Clara, Julian, and Marcus are currently navigating the slow, grinding gears of a public inquiry, their reputations in the architectural community completely shattered. They are ghosts to me now, distant figures in a story that no longer has any hold over my life. Yesterday, I met Alistair for a coffee in a small cafe overlooking the sea in St. Andrews. He handed me a copy of the newly published Heritage Preservation Guidelines, which now bear a dedication to the importance of ethical structural reporting. As I looked out at the cold waves crashing against the ancient stone harbor, I realized that true justice is never loud. It doesn't need to shout, and it doesn't need to destroy. It is simply the patient restoration of balance, the quiet moment when the truth finally aligns with the stone and the structure stands firm once again.